Everything's falling apart. You need a new marker, Abby.
What happened to this one?
It needs to be face down. You need to take care of your marker.
Okay, Mom. Okay. You're right.
Thank you. I know that I'm right.
Okay, I've never seen it.
Hello.
Hey guys, welcome. I'm Abby.
And I'm Shauna.
And this is Anxious.
And Afraid.
The pod.
What's up?
You know, we're back again. We talking about stuff.
Second episode back.
Woohoo.
Look at us.
Episode 104.
104.
Amazing.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about what made us anxious the last couple weeks?
You guys, it's been a tough start to the year for
really-
us specifically.
I don't like 2024. I have a bad feeling about this year.
Yeah, I hate that people are already saying that. I'm trying to not say it, but
It's an election year. It's always a dumpster fire.
that's
on
true.
election
I'm
years.
prepared for the end of the year to be the worst.
Yeah, but also the beginning of the year didn't start so hot.
So we were talking about how it was like cold as fuck outside and everything was frozen and Abby had to come pick me up. It was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we still didn't understand the severity of what was going to happen next.
No, I listened to that episode and just the innocence and naivete in our voice, not realizing the shitstorm we were.
The week and a half we were about to have.
Yeah, it got worse. It got much worse.
Much worse very fast.
Very quickly. Shauna's power went out that night.
That night after the podcast. Mm-hmm.
And then our power went out the next morning.
Yeah. And at first it was like, oh, remember when we were kids and our power went out? It's kind of fun. Like, where
Yeah.
are the candles? What do we do?
Because it was like a couple hours.
Sure. Exactly. You never thought it would be for a long time.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I get to burn all my candles.
Right.
I get to like walk around with my candle like I'm in the 1700s. How fun for me.
I'm the ghost in this scenario. Yeah. And so, and it was early in the evening, so we had some few hours to kill. And then we were like, oh yeah, it's not going to get fixed tonight. So I guess it's good that it's nighttime. We go to sleep, even though me and Chad and my family's sleeps with fans. So that's actually very difficult for us.
Oh yeah, because you don't have the white noise anymore.
No. And we had like the tiniest little like charged up or like battery operated fan that gave us the littlest hum to like fall asleep to.
Mm-hmm.
And then it died in the middle of the night. But yeah, the power was still out the next morning. Everything was like doubly frozen over.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to feed my child. So I kind of started panicking. Like, what do we do? This is too long without power. And so we just spent the whole morning hours melting like one of the sides of the cars of ice to get to Chad's parents' house, who still had power. So we had to stay with them for like 3 nights.
Yeah, because your power just stayed out.
And it was just getting colder still. And then, oh yeah, the next day, all the trees were falling. All the poles were falling too, but there was more trees. I mean, it's terrifying.
I know. We've experienced one bad ice storm before. It wasn't as bad as this one. But I don't think people realize how much damage an ice storm can do. Because there was no snow. Not really.
None
At all. It was just because it rained so much here. There was already so much water. And
it was like an inch of ice overnight.
An actual inch. Like not actually being dramatic. It was an inch of ice.
Right. And then it continued. Like the next day, it was another inch. Like our car, like there's pictures, like our cars were so frozen.
Oh yeah, it took luckily I had dropped you off because my car wasn't as frozen as it could have been. So
yeah, that's true.
But I mean, just so many people fell and injured themselves, including our friend Jesse's husband, who broke his clavicle.
Not chill. That's very upsetting.
My father-in-law fell a couple times and hurt himself. Like it was
terrible.
Like you could look outside and see black ice, and I've never experienced black ice before. I've heard of it, but like our cul-de-sac was literally black ice, and like all the sidewalks, it was very treacherous.
Sidewalks were scary, and I'm not prepared. I don't have boots. I'm not prepared for this kind of stuff. So I'm slipping and sliding in my sneakers, and like don't have proper clothes.
Yeah, we quickly realized how unprepared we were because like. We hadn't gone. I was such an idiot. I was like, I'll go grocery shopping. It's not going to be that bad. So I wasn't able to go grocery shopping. So we were already like low on food. Our power went out. I think it was out for 2 full days and a night. and we stayed at the house because we have the dog. We have Roscoe, so it's not like we could just leave him and go somewhere else. And it was miserable. It's so much worse with a kid because
It's so much worse with a kid. Like, I'm just so worried about her. I mean,
you have so much anxiety. Like, we were all sleeping in one room. It got down into the 40s in our house, and we were all trying to sleep in one room. It was miserable.
I thought about you guys a lot. I was like, oh, I can't even imagine.
Michael and I were sleeping on the floor in Theo's room because it was the smallest room, so we could like close the door and kind of keep a little bit more heat with our bodies in there. But I didn't sleep well because I was just worried about Theo, even though he was in like 6 layers and he was just hating it. He was uncomfortable. He was also teething, going through a sleep regression. Like, it was not fun, you guys.
Rough phase. Yeah.
But we are very thankful for all of the people that worked so hard to get our power back, because it was, you guys, it was a whole, not just our town, just like a huge area was affected by this, and is probably still affected across the country.
I'm still seeing people like saying, okay, 11 days, 15 days without power, just got back. And I'm like, wow, I can't imagine that long without power.
I wanted to lose my mind after 2 days. I can't imagine weeks. Like, that is so rough. I feel so bad for people. And my sister Hannah, she lives, up in the middle of nowhere, and they lost power and water. So they didn't have water. I was just like,
oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about the water thing. Then we came home, power's on, but we don't have internet. So that was a week full of fun of no internet. Oh, yeah. I had to borrow your DVDs. Yeah. It was such a throwback.
She had to borrow my DVDs from like a collection of, I don't even know the last time I bought a DVD, like 10 years ago.
It was
like, don't judge
such a
me
throwback
too hard by what is in here.
But yeah, and then all of a sudden we had to worry about the pipes. So then we got a warning to boil our water. So then I spent a whole evening boiling pots of water, and I'm like, what am I going through? Like, what is this?
Yeah, the plant that treats our water lost power. So then like a huge area was affected.
It's such a domino effect of like everything that can get affected and damaged, and then it's a long time to clean up and repair everything. And I know people are frustrated, but
the roads are still covered in tree branches. Like, Oregon, we are kind of known for our trees. Like, the trees
we're kind of like green with trees everywhere.
It's kind of like our thing.
Yeah.
And they were all destroyed. Like,
they all fell apart.
All of the trees, like the tree in our backyard is bald. Like, all of the branches came off. It is just,
Pam lost a complete tree. It outrooted it. It was a big tree too, and it completely outrooted.
Yeah, it's just the insane damage ice can do that you just don't think about because it's so heavy.
Yeah.
So
I got to see a couple big ones when I was like outside, just like looking and hearing the silence, and just I was like, what is going to happen?
Except for snapping trees
and
everywhere.
then you hear this huge break, and I was like, oh my God.
And transformers blowing. That was another one. Like, these huge booms. You're just like, is this the end of days? Like,
is this how it's going to be when the end of days is here? So then we made a big list of all the things we want to get to prepare for survival.
Generator. I'm like, God damn it. Why are generators so expensive?
Oh, I don't even want to know.
Oh, you can spend a couple $1,000 on a generator, but wow. We got lucky because Michael's parents live next door to us. Yeah. And they always save us.
Our parents still very save us.
They still had plenty of food. They had a gas fireplace that was still working, although the fan was broke. Like, the fan was electric, so we had to they were having to manually fan,
blow it
so that it didn't overheat. But
I see.
That was a lifesaver. We went over there and we were able to get a little warmer, so that was nice. But
yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah, guys, it was a week and a half. Man,
it was quite the ordeal, though.
They're still fixing power lines, or
it's still a mess out there.
Traffic lights, the traffic lights weren't even working for 2 weeks.
I saw a car accident because the traffic lights weren't working.
Yeah, people were having to take turns, and nobody remembers how to do that. So I almost got T-boned by some old lady. She didn't wait her turn.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So everything has been pretty stressful. Yeah, that was fun.
Not a fun couple weeks, but everything's kind of getting back to normal. Although there's another storm warning.
Is that next weekend?
Yeah, it's next weekend. So I'm really hoping we don't lose power again. Because there's so many trees that are still super damaged, and they're just waiting for the right conditions to fall apart even more. Because they're just there's branches hanging on by tree bark, basically. So We're supposed to have
So
another.
if there's wind, those are
yeah.
coming out.
It's a storm. It's supposed to be a ton of rain and high winds and maybe flooding.
What is happening?
I don't know. I don't know. Pray for us.
Pray for us. Okay.
You can be done talking about the storm.
Yeah, that was a lot. Sorry. We went there. But you've been working really hard. Did you want to give a little update on your our website progression?
Yes. Pop the champagne and take off your hard hats because the website is live, y'all. I finished it. The name is a little different than it was, which was an oopsie accident of mine, but it's fine. It's anxiousandafraidthepod.com. It used to be just anxiousandafraid.com.
Mm-hmm.
So just add the pod on there. That's our new website.
Check it out.
Check it out. It's, don't judge me too hard. It's pretty
beautiful.
basic, but I like it. And
I'm so grateful for you doing that.
thank you. I've never done a website before, so I was like pretty proud of myself that I finished that.
You really should you pat yourself on the shoulder.
Here I am. I'll pat right now.
Good job. Snaps to you.
Snap, snaps.
Okay, so I'm very excited because I'm not doing an episode.
Oh, I just looked at the whiteboard and I was like, uh-oh.
That's pretty much all we got.
We don't have anything else to talk about.
We got to get into
I have
it.
to do an episode. Really quick. Michael, I think, can we pause? I can't hear myself. Okay.
Okay, we're good.
We're good. Everything's great. I'm really excited. I'm excited and I'm so nervous because I know you're going to freak out
Oh,
over
yeah.
this.
I think I just remembered.
No, it's
No?
something that we didn't talk about.
Okay.
So I'm excited, but reading is hard and I haven't done this in a while.
I know how you feel because I did it last time, but you're going to be great.
Okay.
And I'm excited.
Okay, here we go.
Ready.
So today we will be revisiting a topic very near and dear to our hearts. A topic that you could say started it all.
I knew it.
For Shauna and I.
I knew it.
Today, I will be once again going back to our love affair with the iconic RMS Titanic.
Wow. Abby.
Do you see why I'm so nervous now? Because it's such a big deal.
First of all, yes. And I totally called it in front of your face, and I'm sorry. I was like, is it the Titanic? And you're like, I'm not telling you. And I'm like,
I was trying to figure out. I was like, wait, don't act too defensive.
right. But I wasn't thinking like full on redoing the Titanic. So I'm stoked. Oh, I kind of wish this was the first episode back. It kind of made more sense.
Okay, well, so I had completely written another episode, and then I ordered this the book that I'm going to be talking about in the mail for this episode, and it came, and I was like, I think I have enough time to read this and also do the Titanic in time for my first episode back. So I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Good for you. Oh my God. I'm
thanks.
so excited.
Me too. I've been.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Go. I'm ready.
Here we go. So I won't be boring you by rehashing all of the details that Shauna already shared with us so many years ago on our very first episode of the podcast.
I legit don't even know what I said.
I forced myself to listen to it. I was prepared for Cringe City, but I gotta say it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't as cringed out as I was expecting to be. So,
Okay.
if you remember, Cold Tiddies and the Titanic was mostly focused on the basic facts around the Titanic's creation and sailing/sinking, and then we delved more deeply into the crazy conspiracies surrounding the ship's sinking. I remember learning quite a bit from that episode, especially concerning the conspiracies, because I didn't even realize that there was conspiracies about the Titanic. But what I didn't get from that episode, and what I will be providing for you today, are the firsthand accounts of what it was like to actually be on the ship, from majestic start to tragic finish.
You're making me speechless. I just got like full body chills because
body
I'm like,
chills.
wow, we're gonna hear perspectives of people. I'm already crying.
My eyes are watering. I'm too emotional. Like, honestly, the book was so hard. It's just, it's like the movie, but it's real. And so you're just like,
That makes it so much worse.
you just have so much, because we've seen that movie so much, I have so many scenes to just like directly relate it back to. So, okay.
okay.
Okay. I'm going to do my best to tell you the stories that the passengers told themselves after surviving the sinking of the ship and all of the horrors they witnessed along the way. Now, before I begin, I must always recognize my main source for today's episode, which is a book called A Night to Remember by Walter Lord.
Wow.
Do you know that one? Have you heard of it?
No.
It's so good. I highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in the Titanic. I loved it.
Yeah. I can see myself actually probably reading that book.
It's not super long, so I think you would. It was published in 1955, which is a little over 4 decades after the ship's sinking.
Mm-hmm.
But Lord was still able to interview 63 survivors and detail their accounts in the book.
Wow, that's such a good chunk. Okay.
I know. It was exactly what I was looking for, because I was like, I want it from the
like
source.
how did you find that? I never even thought about
Googling.
Wow.
I Googled the shit out of it.
Wow.
Okay, so A Night to Remember is considered to be a definitive resource on the Titanic, so I felt pretty comfortable drawing on the accounts from the book.
Uh-huh.
Fun fact, Walter Lord consulted on the iconic movie The Titanic with James Cameron.
Oh,
so he actually was involved in that movie.
I mean, James Cameron is also pretty obsessed with the Titanic.
Yes, he was like the perfect person to make it, honestly.
Yeah.
So you might recognize some of these accounts from scenes in that movie, although some of them were obviously changed for dramatic effect.
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah.
But yeah, it based on like his book, that's where some of those scenes came from. So that's kind of wild.
Yeah.
I also appreciate that he did his best to tell stories from all viewpoints and classes from the time. So you won't be just hearing about what first class passengers went through. He also interviewed employees, third class, all the way up to first class.
Yes.
All right. Now, like I said, I won't rehash too much of the stuff Shauna already went through in the first episode. But if you haven't listened to that one, or maybe it's been a few years, never fear. I will briefly go over some Titanic facts to lay the groundwork before the nitty-gritty first-hand accounts. Because I understand that not everyone is as obsessed with the Titanic as we are for some weird reason.
We're not the weird one.
We're not. So, okay, let's do this. Our beautiful RMS Titanic, which, by the way, RMS stands for Royal Mail Ship, not really massive ship, as I had guessed.
Really massive ship.
Was built for the White Star Line by the shipbuilding company Harland and Wolff in Belfast, Ireland. The Titanic was one of 3 sister ships, the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. And these girls were the biggest ships ever built of their kind up to that time.
Those sisters were killing it.
They were killing it. They're like the Kardashians of the sea. No expense was spared. We're talking like hundreds of millions.
They were the top of the top.
They're top of the tippy top. Lots of doll hairs. And it wasn't just money spent on building the Titanic. It was also time and lives. The Titanic was ordered to be built in 1908 and finished on April 2nd, 1912. And during the course of construction, 8 people would die from building accidents, with over 200 injuries reported, and 20 of those being severe, like limbs lost severe.
Oof. Yes.
The chief naval architect and future passenger of the Titanic was a name we will all probably recognize, Thomas Andrews. Oh, I should have quizzed you. You probably know all the answers.
Oh, totally quiz me.
Okay, I'll try and remember.
I might not, but
the ship was captained by the very experienced
Captain Smith.
Yes, Edward John Smith, who was rumored to be retiring after the ship's maiden voyage.
That's so true.
Just so fucking shitty. Like,
I know.
Oh,
it's like
I feel so bad.
That added detail.
You're like, this is my last trip.
And it was.
Literally. Okay, so allow me to fire off a few pertinent stats on this lovely ship. So in terms of size, not that I am hull shaming, but the Titanic was obviously a sizable gal. She was 882 feet long, which is 269 meters, and 175 feet tall, which is 53.3 meters. She displaced 52,310 tons of water and had a capacity for about 3,300 people, which that number varies depending on your source.
Sure.
She could travel at a max of 26 miles per hour or 43 kilometers per hour, which is 23 knots in ship speak.
Okay.
As most of us know, there is a lot of drama around the lifeboat situation for obvious reasons. And although it is fair to say that they weren't filled to capacity during the sinking, a lot of people gave the Titanic grief for not having enough lifeboats on board to save more than half of the passengers. But we can't necessarily blame that on the people who built the Titanic. According to the regulations of the time, the Titanic actually had more lifeboats on board than was required.
Right, because regulations, it's like they're there for good reasons.
And they were bad. They were like really outdated regulations. So the Titanic had 20 lifeboats, but they were actually only required to technically have 14.
I don't understand, but okay. I mean, yeah.
It doesn't make
clearly, we
sense.
learned the horrible way.
They had some insane formula too for like how to determine how many lifeboats you had. And
That's so weird.
it is. And the Titanic had the capacity to house up to 48 lifeboats, but they had 20. So it's just,
It would just be an eyesore.
yeah, like, oh, there's taking up too much room for all the rich people.
Also, it's unsinkable. So
Yeah.
why would you
Also
need
that.
those?
They're basically
They
decoration.
really believed that.
Yeah. I don't know why that regulation was in place. I didn't take the time to research it, but you can bet that those regulations were changed after what would happen to the Titanic. As for the passenger accommodations, we all know it was famous for its lavishness, especially for the first class customers. They had gymnasiums, swimming pools, fancy restaurants, smoking rooms, and even a Turkish bath.
That's right.
While the third class accommodations were certainly more sparse, they were considered quite nice for the times. Back in the day, the third class passengers would have been in a more like open dormitory type situation, but on the Titanic, the passengers had their own private, albeit tiny, rooms.
Gotcha.
It was also customary for the men in that class to be lodged at one end of the ship and the single women and families to be at the other,
Okay.
just in case like anyone gets any steamy ideas about carnal relations in a car. Steamy handprint.
Good job. Good job.
The Titanic had a capacity for 833 first class passengers, 614 second class, and 1,006 third class or steerage passengers, with an additional capacity of over 900 for crew. For the maiden voyage, there would be 885 staff, 324 passengers in first class, 284 in second class, and 709 in third class. Of these, 66% were male, 34% female, and there were also 107 children on board, with the majority being in third class. All those numbers can vary depending on your source, but
Okay.
that's what we're going to go with.
Just okay.
Yeah, because like people, I guess, would cancel at the last minute or people stowed away, so the numbers aren't hard and fast.
Yeah, like Jack won a card game and won the ticket last minute, and he got to
fucked
get
up
on.
all the numbers. It's his fault. Okay, so those are the basic stats out of the way. If we really wanted to, we could probably talk about the ins and outs of the Titanic forever, but that's not why we're here today.
Okay.
Okay, let's begin our journey. After I take a drink
It's a
of water.
different Titanic spice we're flavoring with.
A different spice? Yes. Okay, so the Titanic begins her maiden voyage on April 10th, 1912, on a Wednesday. She stopped at a few different ports to pick up mail and her passengers, and on April 11th, the Titanic lifted her anchor for the last time and left Ireland for her journey across the Atlantic to New York. The first 3 days of the trip passed without any trouble. The weather was fairly mild until April 14th, when the ship entered a cold weather front. During this time, the Titanic received several warnings of icebergs in the area, but these were ignored by Captain Smith, and the ship continued full steam ahead.
That's so upsetting.
In Smith's defense, this wasn't an uncommon practice,
Sure.
as it was the belief at the time that an iceberg could not take down a ship the size of the Titanic. But
Right.
sadly, hubris rears its ugly head more than once in this story. It was now the evening of April 14th, a Sunday, and it was super chilly outside. The fantastically named lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, had what I imagined to be a very boring but also stressful job of staring out at a black sky and ocean to try and spot any dangers.
Right.
You're just doing it with like a spyglass, like, or your eyeballs.
Yeah, I don't want to say the tool. Okay, so binoculars.
Binoculars?
Okay, I'm saying binoculars. I remember they didn't have those, and I also believe I remember that it was like a new moon, so there was no moonlight.
Correct. I do mention that at some point. You're so smart.
Oh, it's okay.
Actually, I think I'm going to mention that really soon here. But yeah, there was no moon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I can't imagine that job being
That's so boring and
just
cold.
staring and cold. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Literally the next line. From what I read, there was no moon on this night. So there weren't, like the visibility wasn't great.
Right.
However, the sea was strangely calm that evening, with many observers remarking that the sea was so smooth it looked like glass. Which is so weird to think about the Atlantic being that calm, but
Yeah, like especially way out in the ocean like that.
yeah, it'd be so weird. Fleet had already been warned when he started his shift at 10 p.m. to be especially on the lookout for icebergs, but so far he and Lee hadn't spotted any trouble. It was now 11:40 p.m. and the Titanic was cruising along at 22.5 knots when Fleet suddenly spotted something even darker than the sky on the horizon. At first, he thought it was rather small, about the size of 2 tables put together. But as the ship drew closer, the object increased in size, and Fleet banged on the crow's nest bell 3 times to warn of danger ahead. He also quickly picked up the phone and called the bridge, who answered calmly, saying, "What do you see?" Fleet responded, "Iceberg, right ahead." The bridge said thank you and hung up. All were very calm and very polite. Fleet and Lee waited in tense silence as they watched the iceberg draw closer with no change in course from the ship.
Yeah, they just are literally hoping that their message got through, that it's severe enough, and then it's like silence of them just watching the ship hopefully miss the iceberg. And it's just this big thing.
You're just seeing it get bigger and bigger and closer because the ship was moving way too fast.
Right. Oh my God, chills. Okay.
The iceberg continued to grow in size as the Titanic approached, and Lee and Fleet braced themselves for impact. But right at the last moment, the Titanic began to swing to port, and the iceberg glided along the starboard side of the ship. The 2 watchmen breathed a sigh of relief. They had narrowly avoided disaster. Or so they thought.
Oh, that's so sad.
And here, we're going to take a break right here.
Okay.
Did you say banana?
Yep.
Okay.
Whenever you're banana.
What a smooth comeback.
This is staying in.
Okay, good.
Okay. I did eat a banana just now, so that's appropriate. Okay. All right, let's continue.
Okay.
Down at the bridge, Quartermaster George Thomas Rowe had also had an uneventful night until he suddenly felt a disturbance beneath his feet. A low rumbling as if they had just scraped the side of the dock. He looked up to see an iceberg towering 100 feet above the water glide by and disappear into the night. In the galley of the ship, the night baker, Walter Belford, was making rolls for the next day when he felt the jolt and watched as the pan of bread fell from the oven and rolled all over the floor.
Eerie.
In the passenger cabins, one woman felt as though the ship had rolled over 1,000 marbles, while another said they heard an unpleasant ripping sound. Other passengers were more sure of what they had felt. J. Bruce Ismay, do you remember who that is?
Yeah, Mr. Esme.
Do you remember?
I'm just thinking of the movie. But yes.
Was he in the movie?
I mean, that's how I know the names more so through the movie.
I forgot that he was in the movie. He was the managing director of the White Star Line.
Okay.
And he was on the maiden voyage.
Gotcha.
So he was sleeping in his deluxe suite when he woke up from the jolt, sure that they had just hit something. Other passengers felt the jolt and ran to their portholes only to see a wall of ice gliding by.
Oh my God.
One man named James McGow happened to have his porthole open and experienced chunks of ice falling into his cabin as the iceberg scraped by.
Oh, speaking of,
Roscoe scraped by. Just hit my mic. Okay.
but that's eerie. Oh my gosh, like actual ice coming through the window.
Just falling into your room. And you're in the middle of the ocean. That's the last thing you expect. Men who were playing cards in the smoking room felt the jolt and ran out to the deck to see the iceberg passing by. But these men, much like most of the people on board, assumed it had just been a close call and returned to the smoking room to continue their game. But one of them noticed that the engines had stopped.
Right.
Down at the bridge, things had definitely become tense. First Officer William Murdoch had received the iceberg warning from Fleet and had quickly ordered a hard turn to starboard and full speed astern to the engine room while punching the close button for the watertight doors. And then he waited in tense silence. When the grinding jolt went through the ship, he knew he had been too late. Soon, Captain Smith rushed in and was apprised of the situation by Murdoch. He ordered the emergency doors closed, but this had already been done. Mm-hmm. Down below in boiler room number 6, the men working down there were already well aware of the danger they were in. A fireman and an engineer were talking when the warning bell and flashing red lights began to go off. Seconds later, an ear-splitting crash resounded as the side of the ship gave way to a deluge of frigid water. Both men were able to slip beneath the watertight doors, and that scene in the movie gives me so much anxiety.
Oh my god, it's one of the worst scenes in the movie.
They're just like sliding under. I was just like,
the
Indiana Jones. Yeah. Ugh,
It's
I
not
hate
okay.
So they were able to get beneath the watertight doors before they closed, but they found that the gash in the side of the ship was extended about 2 feet into this compartment as well, and the ocean water was steadily jetting through the hole. So even if you think you're safe, you're still not. I know. As all of this was happening, floating only about 10 miles away was the ship, the SS Californian, who had stopped moving at 10:30 due to the drifting ice.
Oh, so they were like just chilling because it was too dangerous.
Literally chilling.
Why not? Okay, all right, that's smart.
So they're like, oh, ice, we'll just hang out here until we can
see.
Fucking see.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Roughly an hour before the Titanic hit the iceberg, the Californian had attempted to warn the Titanic wireless operators that there were icebergs in the area, but the operators aboard the Titanic had just made contact with Cape Race and were more than annoyed at the loud interruption from the Californian, who was so close that the message came through super loud.
Oh.
The operator on the Titanic responded to the Californian saying, shut up, I am busy, I am working on Cape Race.
Oh my god.
The Californian's like, Jesus, okay, well, have fun with the ice. So they never actually got to officially give the ice warning to the Titanic.
Wow.
Because they got cut off.
Okay.
In a very rude way.
Rude.
Then the crew of the Californian had seen a large passenger ship rapidly pass their position, stop suddenly, and turn off most of its lights.
Oh my gosh.
So that's what they think they saw. But what they really saw was the Titanic turn sharply to avoid that iceberg. So suddenly she was now at a different angle and they couldn't see most of her lights.
Oh.
So they didn't realize that she had made the sharp turn. They thought she just stopped and turned off her lights. Which at that time of night, they're like, well, that's not that weird because like maybe they're turning in and they turn off the lights to make everyone go to bed, and maybe they didn't just hit an iceberg is basically what they're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, you're hoping not that situation.
So Captain Stanley Lord of the Californian told his crew to signal the ship with Morse lamps, which is like Morse code with lamps. But the Titanic didn't respond.
Okay.
For the majority of the passengers aboard the Titanic, after the jolt of hitting the iceberg, most people assumed it was nothing and went back to bed or drinking or whatever they had been up to. But a few people began to notice something was off. A boy who had his porthole open stopped feeling a breeze as the ship slowed to a stop. A woman in her cabin noticed her dresses had stopped swinging on their hangers. Other passengers let their curiosity get the better of them and wandered out in their bathrobes and fur coats to see what was happening.
Bathrobes and fur coats.
Yeah.
Sounds like a band name.
It does sound like a band name. Rumors of hitting an iceberg were floating around, but nobody seemed particularly alarmed. John Jacob Astor, the wealthiest man aboard, calmly went back to his room to tell his pregnant wife that they had struck an iceberg, but everything was fine. In the third-class recreation area, a couple of young passengers were playing with chunks of ice, throwing them at each other and across the deck, just like on the movie.
Yeah, like kicking it like soccer.
Yeah. At 11:50, 10 minutes after the crash, shit starts to get very ominous. And these first inclinations of what was to come, like, it gives me goosebumps. So, a crew member lying in his bunk, which was close to the bow of the ship, began to hear a hissing sound from the increased air pressure due to how quickly water was flooding in below.
Ew.
I hate that. It's just like something you wouldn't even think of. And I'm just like,
no,
that's disgusting.
that's just so eerie.
It's so eerie. A fireman was woken up by the sound of water rising up the spiral staircase that led to his quarters.
Spiral. Okay. Just the images, man.
I know. Passengers in steerage jumped out of their bunks only to land in frigid water up to their ankles.
Yep.
Mail clerks frantically tried to move the mail out of the quickly flooding mailroom, but were soon forced to abandon it. Back at the bridge, bad news was coming in hot for Captain Smith. He was informed that they were taking on water fast, and the captain responded by calling for Thomas Andrews. Soon the pair were touring the ship to inspect the damage. They noticed the water had surpassed the flooded mailroom and was now lapping against the floors of the squash court, which is like racquetball.
Right.
People who passed them tried to look at their faces for signs of stress, but the pair were careful to appear calm. Then Smith and Andrews stopped their tour to basically do that scene from the movie. Andrews has his blueprints out, and he explains to Captain Smith that there is likely a 300-foot gash in the side of the ship, and the first 5 compartments were already flooded. He said, quote, "The Titanic could float with any 2 of her 16 watertight compartments flooded. She could float with any 3 of her first 5 compartments flooded. She could even float with all of her first 4 compartments gone. But no matter how they sliced it, she could not float with all of her first 5 compartments full.
I know.
The bulkhead between the 5th and 6th compartments only went as high as E deck. If the first 5 compartments were flooded, the bow would sink so low that the water in the 5th compartment must overflow into the 6th. When this was full, it would overflow into the 7th, and so on.
Okay, yep.
It was a mathematical certainty, pure and simple. There was no way out."
Ew. Hate it.
I know. It's awful. At 12:05, Captain Smith gave the order to uncover the lifeboats and ordered the wireless operators to send out a distress call. 10 miles away sat the Californian, completely oblivious to the dire situation the Titanic was in because they only had one wireless operator, the one who had been yelled at by the Titanic for trying to warn them of icebergs. That operator had hung up his headset and gone to bed at 11:30.
Wow.
Which was the end of his shift, and there was nobody to replace him and nobody to hear the distress calls coming from the Titanic.
I feel like you can't blame him, but
no, it's not his fault. Like, that was his shift. He's done.
That was his shift. He had to go to bed.
He got yelled at. He had a terrible day.
Wow, everything is so unfortunate and just like one hair over the possibility of not being the worst, and it's just right over that.
Yeah.
So it is the worst.
So many little things that could have made such a difference.
Yeah, that's why it's like just so frustrating.
It's very frustrating. So back aboard the Titanic, there was an unbalanced reaction to what was happening on the ship. Many of the passengers in third class had been closer to the location where the iceberg struck, so they weren't messing around and had already begun dressing and gathering their things. This was the same of the employees. Those who were unaware were soon informed. In one case, a boatswain popped his head into the cabins and said, quote, "Turn out, you fellows. You haven't an hour to live. That is from Mr. Andrews. Keep it to yourself and let no one know."
Okay. There's so much I'm upset with that quote. First off, you have an hour to live.
You have an hour to
Casually.
live. That's from Mr. Andrews.
Just pop it in. And then also tell no one and keep it to yourself. Like, we're all going to die in an hour. Why isn't everyone screaming, get out?
Yeah, and therein lies the problem of why so many people were unaware of the true danger they were in until it was too late. The crew didn't want everyone to panic, so the danger was largely downplayed to the passengers. Especially the women, because we don't want hysterics, right?
Of course not.
Stewards began going from cabin to cabin to order the women and children on deck and to tell everyone to put on their life jackets. They were more polite with the first class passengers, but the message was the same. Some people reacted with alarm and got dressed as quickly as they could, or just threw a coat on over their pajamas while grabbing all valuables. Others took their time and left their valuables behind, assuming they would be back for them. We're talking hundreds of thousands, I'm sure millions of dollars worth of like jewelry, cash, stocks, bonds,
Absolutely.
like
Safes.
famous paintings, like all kinds of shit that went down with that ship. It's insane. And so the heart of the ocean, we're assuming.
Yes.
And so the passengers on the Titanic made their way out to their respective decks, all keeping to the class system, with first class in the center of the ship, second class a little aft of the ship, and third class at the stern or near the bow. Everyone stood around making nervous jokes as the crew rushed to their positions at the lifeboats. A man named Colonel Gracie joked to the squash instructor that they had better cancel their morning appointment, not realizing that the squash court was already underwater.
Flooded. Oh my God.
Captain Smith lightly joked to a woman not wanting to wear her life jacket, saying even if they didn't have to use them, at least it would keep her warm. Crew members began converging on the lifeboats and pulling off their covers. Critically, passenger drills had not yet been done with the lifeboats, and with this being the maiden voyage, many of the crew members were also unsure of what they should be doing. Finally, First Officer Lightoller and Chief Officer Wild had boats lowered flush with the deck, ready to board passengers. But the second issue was getting the women and children into the boats. Many of them weren't convinced that the ship was sinking and thought the nice bright deck of the Titanic was a far better option than sitting in a small dark lifeboat on the ocean.
Sure.
Which is fair.
I get the hesitation.
Yeah, but you also just want to shake them. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know what's about to happen.
Right.
On the starboard side, First Officer Murdoch was in charge of loading another lifeboat and quickly loaded as many women and children who would willingly go. Sometimes couples were allowed, and a few single men. At 12:45, Murdoch felt like he couldn't wait any longer, and he lowered the first boat into the water. There were 20 people in the boat,
Oh, that's so pretty.
which is not even a third of the way full.
Wait, so like they couldn't get people because they weren't freaking out yet at that point, so that's why
Basically.
they didn't fill it.
Yeah. But also, I don't know this, well, pretty for certain. These are first class passengers, maybe second class. Third class hasn't even been addressed yet. Like,
Sure, of course.
they're below, they're not being boarded onto these boats. So they're just like looking at all the rich people. They're like,
And the rich are still like, la la la, rather not.
who had been furthest away. So it's like they are the least apprised of what's going on, probably. And yeah, and nobody wants to get in these boats because things aren't super dire yet. So they're like,
So
I don't want to do that. Like,
Yeah.
there's
hate
like
it.
nice drinks and stuff on this boat.
But then it's like, okay, so if like no more rich people want to get on the boat, then you go to the second class. If you're going to go in order of class, like you don't just leave it empty. You fill out the boat.
You're correct.
Thank
It
you.
just didn't happen.
I'm so upset.
I know, it's very upsetting.
Okay.
All while this was happening, the grand 8-person band was on deck playing a lively ragtime tune for the passengers waiting on the deck. Which is, I feel like it's just such a specific detail for the Titanic.
Well, I think that's why it's always mentioned in the story of the Titanic, because it is such an eerie. He's snoring. Or no, that was yours. Sorry, distracted. But yeah, you said there was 8 of them.
Eight members in the band.
And
They're
they're
playing like ragtime music. It's
The
just
violins, right?
I think there's, I don't know all the instruments they play. There's definitely violins.
There's definitely more than that. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, just the fact that they're deciding to play to try and keep it like calm and normal through like the most horrific thing that's about to happen. And
Yeah.
the fact that they also, and this like, and this is so real. Like you keep forgetting it's a real, that these
because of the
men,
movie.
right? These men did that until they literally couldn't anymore. The water was like at their feet and they all,
I think they
died.
yeah, it's an actual thing that happened, which is just,
and that was like
it
their
seems like
legacy.
it seems like a movie detail, like that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
You think, oh, they just said that for them. No, it actually happened in real life.
It is honorable and just such a like, ew, just like I don't know, is it human? It's so eerie.
There was definitely, I mean, this is like, you know, way back when, so I feel like there's more of like this honor code for the men, like,
Sure.
especially as time goes on, where they're just like, we'll go down like gentlemen, like,
Yeah.
you know, but I don't know if it would be that way today. Like, I feel like it'd be a little bit more equal.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah.
But yeah, yes, it's very eerie. It's very specific, I feel, to the Titanic.
It is.
So down in the boiler room, things were growing more desperate, which I feel like is like the worst spot in the ship. I don't want to be anywhere near it.
No, that's the most panic inducing. In a way,
even when the ship isn't sinking, I don't want to be shoveling coal into hot
dirty and
flames.
grimy and hot.
It seems terrible.
Nope.
So the men there were operating water pumps to keep the Titanic afloat and operational for as long as possible.
See, you got it. You have you literally
That's your
have to.
job.
Yeah, you literally have to.
But then you're like, why does my job fucking matter? I'm about to die. Like,
Yeah, you would have that conflict, I think, in your head.
Like why am I have to do this?
I could just leave.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm going to die, but you don't.
You want to save it? Yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
So one man had slipped and broken his leg during the process of trying to fix everything, and he was laying off to the side while the others worked. And just as it seemed that they may be succeeding in pumping out all the water, the bulkhead behind the boilers collapsed and a wall of water came rushing into the room. Oof. Some escaped, but a man attempting to rescue the man with a broken leg was lost to the rising waters.
Oh, that's so gross.
I know. Let's just take another break real quick.
Okay.
It was now 12:45 inside the wireless shack, and the operators were sending out distress calls as fast as they could. Ships were answering them, but they were all too far away to make it in time. All the same, the Carpathia and the Olympic had begun routing their way as fast as they could to the Titanic's position. Kind of fun fact, the SOS signal that we're also familiar with was a brand new call at this time. Before, they had been making CQD calls, which stood for Calling All Stations Distress, but the Titanic would be the very first ship, like in history, to make an SOS call.
Oh, that is a fun fact.
Right? It's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool.
It's kind of cool.
I never thought of that being like, I just always thought SOS was a thing.
A standard. Yeah, it was, I tried to read into why they changed it. It got too boring and technical, but they switched over to SOS. And I think in the book, the operators were like joking to each other, like, "Hey, do you want to make this call? Like, it might be the last time you ever get to." Like,
oh my gosh.
ha ha ha.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So the Titanic was the first to make the SOS call. They really needed it, and then they didn't get it.
Yeah.
And then it's also like frustrating, or like being on the ships that are coming, like the Carpathia or whatever. Mm-hmm. They can't go fast enough. Like if they're cranked up, like you can't do any more than that. So you're painfully waiting for yourself to arrive.
Yeah, and even if they do get there quickly, then they have to slow down because of all the fucking icebergs.
Yeah.
So yeah, not good. Okay, so it was also at 12:45 that the first rocket was fired from the Titanic to signal any nearby ships, and Captain Smith gave the order to fire one every 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. The Californian was close by, of course, and saw the rocket, but the crew of that ship didn't understand why the nearby ship would be firing off rockets.
Are you serious?
Such a fucking forehead slap. Like, guys!
Like, it's not a firework.
Like,
it's
wow,
not for entertainment.
That's fun. Look at them doing over there. They're just
That's
having
pretty.
a time.
Huh. Let's not mention that.
I think they went down to their captain and he was like, "What color are the rockets?" And they're like, "White." And he's like, "Huh. Well, back to bed."
Why would that just be a normal thing?
I don't know. Is there a different color for rockets? That means something different. I don't know. Like, why wouldn't you see that and just assume something bad was happening?
Yeah, or like immediately want to check it out because you need to know what it is.
Yeah, and I don't know how many more times I check in. I can't remember if I check in with the Californian again, but like, there's so many signs, and they keep going like, "Huh,
That's so
weird.
frustrating too. That
Well, that's weird.
they
Well,
just don't.
kind of looks like it's listing. That's kind of weird." And then they just don't see it at all anymore, and they're like, "Oh, must have left.
That's weird.
Oh, must have
We
sailed
didn't
away."
see it go away, but it's away now.
Well,
So
anyway,
stupid.
back to bed.
Gosh, the human error and the stupidity it hurts.
It's very frustrating.
Yeah.
After the passengers on the Titanic watched the rockets burst white in the sky overhead, they began to grasp the gravity of the situation, and the anxiety to get into one of those lifeboats began to rise. Mm-hmm. The goodbyes are heartbreaking. I'm just warning you. Oh, gosh. They're really fucking hard. As more women and children were loaded on the boats, their husbands and fathers tried to put on a brave face, knowing they may not make it. Mm-hmm. Dr. W.T. Minahan told his wife, quote, "Be brave. No matter what happens, be brave." One husband simply said to his wife, "I'll see you later." Some of the women put up a fight to stay with their husbands.
Yeah.
Mrs. Smith refused to go without her husband and kept asking Captain Smith if they could both go. The husband told his wife the ship was well equipped and everyone would be saved. The woman asked Captain Smith if that was true, and he answered with a firm yes. Mm-hmm. So she ended up getting on the boat, and her husband wouldn't survive the sinking.
It's such a... Like, you think that's a terrible thing, but then you're also, like, the other side of it is like, well, I'm saving her by lying.
Right.
Oh, my
So
God.
he was, like, obviously in on it, knowing, like, she's not going to get on unless we lie to her. And it's just so awful.
I would have a hard time leaving my husband.
Right? I was trying to, like, put myself in their shoes, and I'm like,
I'd be too scared.
what would I do? Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to leave. Mm-mm. I don't know. What would you do, Michael? Would you shove me into a boat?
You push her off.
I want to think I would do that.
Clinging to my leg. Don't leave me. Yeah, it's just an impossible situation to be in. And
Yeah.
especially if you have kids like that.
Don't even. I mean, you might, but yeah.
I already
bad.
say later on, I don't really go into the kid stuff because I'm too soft. I'm too soft now.
Honestly, yep. It's true when they say once you have kids, things are like different, and absolutely.
You just can literally not help but think of your own kid. It's just literally impossible.
And like your feelings are so intense for your child that it's just like the emotions you can't.
Yeah, just reading about it was making me like cry, and I was just like, I
cry
can't.
so much more.
Yeah, I was like, I can't type about it.
I can't think about it.
Cannot. Okay, so there were women who were just like, they were just tossed into the boat against
Yeah.
their will when
Yeah.
they refused to go.
Yeah.
There were others, however, who convinced their companions to let them stay. Mrs. Isidore Strauss refused to leave her husband's side. They were an older couple who had been together for many years.
Yeah.
When he tried to convince her to go, she told him, quote, "Where you go, I go." And that was it. They plopped down in some deck chairs, and the pair would perish in the sinking together.
Is that the old couple? That's the bed
Yeah.
scene. Yeah.
They show them on the bed, but I don't think they were actually on a bed. I think they were.
I can see that being for the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely gets, for
But it
sure.
is, yeah, right.
But
in the
they're
gut.
based on a true couple that did that. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So the slant of the deck was becoming more pronounced now, and passengers who had left their valuables behind started to regret their choice and ran back to retrieve them, only to find their rooms completely underwater.
Oh my gosh.
One woman was almost locked into her room by a steward locking doors to prevent looting. Another steward yelled
The
at
priorities are not straight on a lot of this.
looting.
My God.
Like, and what else is, they're just going to be at the bottom of the ocean. But okay.
It doesn't make any sense.
No. Another steward yelled at a man trying to bust a door open that had become jammed, also in the movie, trapping someone inside. The steward scolded them for damaging the ship and told them they would be charged for it. So I punched that guy in the face.
Such an asshole.
I know.
Damage for the ship that is literally has
Sinking.
a 300-foot gash sinking to the bottom of the ocean. The fact
Sir.
that somebody still says I'm going to charge you.
Sir, you can't do that.
The audacity. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
But also it's like maybe they just really didn't grasp
get it.
what was happening, you know? Women and children were now being loaded into the boats more frantically, with Thomas Andrews personally urging them on.
Yeah.
Time was passing quickly, and anxiety was making people sloppy. One woman slipped and missed the lifeboat, falling down the side of the ship, but was amazingly caught by her ankle and hauled back up.
Wow.
I know.
Ankle. Wow. 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 Wow.
Do you think she was in a dress? Like her skirt just right
I mean,
over
honestly, at that point, you don't care.
my panties. Yeah, so she was saved, and I think she ended up in a boat and probably made it.
Wow. What a journey.
I know. The launching of the lifeboats was also getting more sloppy, as most of the trained seamen had already launched in the previous lifeboats. Officer Lightoller continued to oversee the loading of the boats while glancing at the emergency staircase behind him, which went all the way down to E deck. Every time he checked it, he could see green seawater crawling up the stairs, still lit by the electric lights.
So eerie.
Just the imagery is like, oh. On the other side of the ship, where Murdoch was in charge, more men were allowed on lifeboats. If there was room, he would allow them on. Well, the first-class men, anyway. In a very fucked up turn of events, that will surprise no one, the third-class passengers were still stuck waiting below. The stewards would call through the crowd for women and children, but many of them didn't want to tear their families apart and stayed, or they just weren't able to get to the front of the crush of people.
Terrible.
The crowds began banging on the barriers, just like in the movie, to be let out. And then some of the men began climbing the railing to get to a higher level or using different routes to get around the barriers. The ones who stayed stuck below paced about nervously or prayed together in groups. Amazingly, even further below, men were still at work in the engine rooms that hadn't flooded yet, trying to keep the steam up and the pumps going to keep the lights on and the Titanic afloat for as long as possible. But soon, the water began seeping up through the floors and the men made a run for it. By now, most of the boats had launched, some with as few as 12 people. The passengers looked at the Titanic from the lifeboats and could see and hear, just hear the band playing music.
Wow.
From the lifeboat.
You can hear it from the life. I never thought of that.
How eerie would that be?
You just think about them hearing it on the ship while it's sinking.
They can hear it from the lifeboats.
Ew. Why do I hate that so much more? I hate it.
You're just watching it.
You're watching it and there's classical music playing.
And they can see from their vantage point how bad it's getting.
Yeah,
because,
they literally have the full view of it.
Yeah.
I also don't envy that. That's traumatic.
It's so traumatic.
Oh my God.
No one wins in this story.
No one.
So they could hear the music, and they remarked that the Titanic was beginning to resemble a sagging birthday cake.
Sad.
I know. Back in the wireless room, the operator was still frantically sending out distress calls until he was informed by Captain Smith that they were losing power and couldn't last much longer. At 1:45, he made a desperate call to the Carpathia saying, quote, "Come as quickly as possible, engine room filled up to the boilers." The wireless operator was so enthralled by what he was doing, he hardly noticed his coworker putting a warm jacket on him and strapping a life jacket to his body. Isn't that sweet?
Wow.
What a coworker. When he was finally pulled away from his station, he looked out at the ship and realized the dramatic slant the deck had taken, and it was also now listing to port. He could see water sloshing around the foot of the mast and noticed the silence of the large funnels no longer emitting steam.
Wow. So like he was in that room doing the calls. So he wasn't really out seeing it all being played out.
Right. He was just getting like updates from people
right. And
running
of course that's still terrifying. You're the one who's the messenger asking like Mayday calls, which is terrifying. And then the shockingness of walking out, seeing what's actually happening.
Yeah. And somebody took over for him after he left.
Especially at that stage.
Yeah. And I think the guy that took over, like,
wow,
he did it until like the room was almost like filling. Yeah. Like they were at it until the last second.
Yeah.
It was nuts. And like I think the second guy, he got so wrapped up in it. Somebody was literally stealing the life jacket off of his body and he didn't notice. And like his friend came up and punched the dude out.
Wow.
And he was able to escape. But like insane. It's just insane.
Wow.
All right. So let's see, where was I? Okay. So it was around this time Officer Wilde ordered everyone to move to the other side of the ship to correct the list so that they could continue launching the remaining lifeboats, which actually worked, which is kind of insane.
I was like, they really think that's going to work? Is that going to work?
It worked.
Wow.
It fixed the list enough to be able to continue launching the lifeboats.
Wow. Okay. Smart. Okay.
Yeah. So the scene around the remaining lifeboats was devastating. People were no longer fighting to stay out of the boats. They were now fighting furiously to get in them. Mm-hmm. A group of men who had broken through the gates in third class stormed one of the boats and jumped in. Most were hauled back out, but one man found a woman's shawl and was able to disguise himself to stay. One man who was surprisingly able to make it into a lifeboat was J. Bruce Ismay, the director of the White Star Lines. He would survive the sinking, but he would retire soon after and become a recluse until his death. Ismay was vilified as the highest ranking executive to make it out alive, even though he did help many people into lifeboats. I think he got on the very last lifeboat out, but people still just tormented him for the rest of his life. He had, I mean,
brutal.
What's the right answer there? Like,
I know.
You're mad at someone for living?
Like, I can kind of get it, but I don't get the intensive, consistent badgering of it. It's like, oh, if you don't like it, okay, you don't like it, then move on. Like, what are you gonna do? Kill him? Like, I mean,
yeah. And he had bad blood with what's his name? Hurst, the newspaper guy. William.
I don't know why.
Hurst.
Is,
Do you know what I'm talking about? Super rich.
Oh.
He owned all the newspapers back in the day.
Gotcha.
But they had bad blood, so like he was in control of the news, so he was able to just like badger him and like run him through the mud over and over again. And it's like,
humans are not kind to other humans.
It was bad. I get the anger towards him because obviously he had a hand in like how the ship was built, all that stuff. But like,
it's messy.
It's messy.
It's a lot of complex feelings for sure.
But like, he also went through so much trauma, and to be just tortured for the rest of your life is
right.
That's hard. Another charge by a group of men was stopped when Officer Lowe pulled out a handgun and shot it 3 times into the side of the ship, shouting, "If anyone else tries that, this is what he'll get." But not all passengers were frantic to leave. Some calmly accepted their fates. William Stead was seen reading alone in the first-class smoking room. Benjamin Guggenheim had gone down to his room to put on his finest evening clothes along with his valet. They took off their life jackets and said, quote, "We've dressed in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen." The Allison family, along with their young daughter, refused to get in a lifeboat, stating, "Not on your life. We started this together, and if need be, we'll finish together." And the whole family died.
Wow.
Can you imagine making that choice for your kid, though? Like,
yeah, that's messy.
It's messy. The last 2 boats were now being loaded. A pregnant Mrs. Astor was being put on a boat when John Jacob Astor asked if he could go with her in her delicate condition, but was told no. He too would perish in the sinking.
That's right.
And he was the richest man on board.
Right.
It was nearing 2 a.m. as the last boat was being loaded. A ring formed around the lifeboat, and only women and children were let through the crowd. The lights on the Titanic were beginning to glow red, and the passengers could hear glass dishes breaking below as the tilt of the ship caused brand new glassware to slide off the shelves. Some male passengers were seen weaving through the crowds with bottles of booze in their hands, which honestly, same. Like, if I knew I was going down, I'd be like, okay, where's the alcohol? Like, I want to be drunk as fuck for this.
Seriously.
As the last boat began to lower, 2 more women rushed forward. Miss Evans told Mrs. Gracie to go first as she had children at home. Mrs. Gracie climbed in, but Miss Evans never got her chance. As she watched the boat leave, she couldn't help but think about something a fortune teller had told her once. Beware of the water.
Ew.
And she would perish too.
Wow.
That's eerie. After all the boats had launched, it was said an eerie calm settled over the Titanic as the passengers awaited their fates. They mostly clustered together on the upper decks, staying away from the rails. There were two collapsible lifeboats left, but they were tied down to the roof of the officers' quarters, and the stewards were struggling to get them free in time.
Right.
It was 2:05 when Captain Smith began doing his rounds, releasing employees from their duties. He walked into the wireless shack where operators were still making frantic calls with the dying electricity. He told them, quote, "Men, you have done your full duty. You can do no more. Abandon your cabin. Now it's every man for himself. You look out for yourselves. I release you." That's the way of it at this kind of time.
That's the way of it at this kind of time. Why is that so?
It's
So very British.
Oh, it's very British.
Wow, that is a line that got me. Oh, okay.
People now began jumping off the sinking ship in hopes of making it to a lifeboat before they got too far away. Some of them were lucky enough to make it and were hauled in. All the while, the 8-person band still played their music for those still left on the ship, which must have been such a strange.
So hard and very strange. Yeah.
Inside the grand ship, where only hours before it had been filled with elegantly dressed people having dinner and drinking, it was now filled with seawater. The crystal chandeliers were still brightly lit, but hanging at an angle. Glassware rolled around the tilted floor as a few last stragglers dug through the kitchen for a last quick meal. Oh, same for me too. Like, give me the booze and a snack. It was 2:10 when a steward found Mr. Thomas Andrews alone in the smoking room, looking broken and lost.
Right.
His life jacket was thrown on an empty table and he seemed dazed. The
I
steward,
remember the scene.
I know. The steward asked, quote, "Aren't you going to have a try for it, Mr. Andrews?" But he didn't answer, and the steward left him there. I think that's the last time he was seen, too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, 100%.
sad. Water began washing over the bridge as officers Murdoch and Lightoller still worked with each other to free the collapsible, but the slant of the deck was making it even harder. They managed to finally cut one loose, but it fell off the roof and landed upside down. Their only hope was for the boats to simply float off as the Titanic sank below them.
Wow.
It was now 2:15 and the bridge dipped beneath the waves. The water began racing up the boat deck, and the band, still valiantly playing lively ragtime music, switched to the somber tune of Nearer My God to Thee, which I listened to while I wrote this, and it was fucking sad. It's really sad. And it's the same song that they play in the movie.
Yeah.
When they show, like, the old people dying, and
Yep.
it's
So eerie.
James Cameron. It's an emotional terrorist.
He actually did a really good job. Like, I mean, I know it's not like fully accurate, but it's pretty accurate.
It was weird reading the book. I'm like, oh, like
That scene
he
and that
actually
scene.
pulled really heavily from this, like from actual stuff that happened. So
I mean, I think he probably did his research and like wanted to do like pull like personal stories to
make it as real as possible. He did a good job. Okay, so hold on to your butts because we are solidly into the second tape of the movie.
The second VHS
The
tape.
second VHS tape.
The one no one wanted to put in.
It's just terrible from here on out. It already has been, but
Yeah.
it doesn't get better.
Yeah.
Some of the passengers were lucky enough to be near one of the collapsibles that was right side up and simply jumped in as the boat floated away. Another man found himself trapped beneath the overturned collapsible and remained that way for quite some time, surviving in the air pocket. He actually made it out alive.
Good. Oh, wow.
Yeah. People began to leap off the ship into the ocean or were washed off by the large waves washing over the deck. Many others ran towards the ever higher and steeper stern as the bow sunk lower and the stern rose higher into the air. Officer Lightoller watched as people were engulfed by the waves washing over the deck and decided to make a jump for it. When he swam back up to the surface, he was met with the sight of the crow's nest now level with the surface of the water. Just so gross.
Yeah, it is.
He began to swim away in front of the ship, but was sucked under against the metal grating of a ventilation shaft. He wondered if that's how he would die until a burst of hot air from deep inside the ship blasted through the air shaft and shot him back up to the surface, where he was able to swim away. I think he survives.
Whoa, that's wild.
Yeah. And right here, I was going to say, like, there are accounts of what happened to some kids, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to tell those. So you can just use your imaginations or you can disassociate like I did. The slant of the Titanic's deck had now grown so steep that people could no longer stand and started sliding down it. There was also a tremendous racket from all of the snapping and breaking of metal and wood on the ship mixed with the passengers' screams.
Yeah.
The people watching from the lifeboats said that the passengers looked like swarms of bees clinging to the parts of the ship that were still above water.
Well, that's a description.
I know. I can just see it. Oof. Incredibly, they could still see this happening because the lights on the Titanic were still burning.
Wow. I'm really surprised that they didn't go out faster.
I know. it makes it so much more eerie because
you're actually seeing it more.
and you could probably see them underwater.
I didn't even think about that, Abby.
It's worse.
Like, okay.
Just crying through the whole thing.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I apologize for everything. As the stern continued to rise higher into the air, the stress became too much for the large forward funnel and it toppled over, crushing many of the swimmers in its path.
That's also terrible. Like, you're in the water, you're swimming away, you're thinking, okay, well, but then you get smashed by a huge metal thing.
And they do they do a good job of that, I think, in the movie, just like demonstrating how big those fucking funnels
Things are, yeah.
They're huge. I think one of the people who saw it described it. They're like, I was just stunned by the size of it when it fell. He's like, I'm pretty sure you could drive 2 cars like side by side through one of them. Like they're just huge. So the bow continued to rise until it was perpendicular to her and her massive propellers were out of the water, just like in the open air, dripping.
Which is gross.
The people in the lifeboats either watched it in silent shock or they buried their faces, unable to bear it. Mm-hmm. After a couple of breathless minutes, the Titanic began her final ascent, picking up speed, sliding down into the waves. And it was said that she went down fast enough for there to be an audible gulp when she went completely beneath the surface.
Ew. The sounds, all of the sounds.
All of it. One of the officers in the lifeboat noted the time and announced it was now 2:20.
Wow.
And I think we could take another break. Okay. After the Titanic was gone, the waters were full of screaming, clamoring people and various debris from the ship. The water was brutally cold at a meager 28 degrees Fahrenheit or -2 degrees Celsius.
Yikes.
Officer Lightoller said it felt like 1,000 knives driven into his body. Some panicked and began clinging to other people in their desperation, pulling them under.
Yeah.
Some of the strongest swimmers were able to make it to the collapsible boats, either crawling into the boat that was right side up or crawling on top of the boat that was upside down.
Yeah, there was one boat that stayed upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're totally right. And there was like some guys standing on it. Okay.
Yeah, I think quite a few men managed to make it. They were like at least a dozen that were up on top of the upside down boat.
Oh, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Amount.
One of the men who managed to make it into the boat was actually my inspiration for doing this story today. I saw a little blurb about him, and he had a fascinating life, including surviving the Titanic. So his name was Richard Norris Williams, and he was an American world-famous champion tennis player. He was on the Titanic with his father, and Williams was the guy the steward yelled at for breaking down a door and damaging White Star Line property.
Oh, okay. We're
This
back
guy.
there. Okay.
Yep. So that story inspired the scene in the movie. And when the ship was going down, the father and son jumped into the water, but the father was crushed by that falling funnel, and it missed Williams by mere feet.
Whoa.
So Williams he made it to the lifeboat, but his legs became so frostbitten that after he got rescued, spoiler, the doctor wanted to amputate his legs, but he flat out refused because of his tennis career and I'm sure other reasons. So he just nonstop walked until the circulation came back and he fucking healed himself.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I saw that little story about him and I was like, oh, there's actually like firsthand accounts from the Titanic. Like, what? And then that's how I kind of went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah, he had a crazy story. Okay, so anyway, the lifeboats that were barely even half full in some cases floated some distance away for fear of being swarmed and sank by the swimmers. Officer Lowe, however, decided to go back for survivors, but it took him too long to get back, and instead of being swarmed, they found only the dead. In the end, they only were able to save 5 people.
I know, that's so upsetting too.
Because it took them minutes to succumb, like just minutes to die in water
I guess
that
that's
cold.
Yeah, I guess that's true too. I didn't think about. Yeah, you're right. So I guess a lot of them died really fast because it was freaking freezing
From just hypothermia. Like,
yeah.
In other boats, the occupants told the officer rowing not to go back because they didn't want to risk themselves. One woman said, quote, "Why should we lose all of our lives in a useless attempt to save others from the ship?"
Okay.
Damn.
That's one outlook. It's not a good one.
Some of the officers in the lifeboats refused to go back, even if the occupants demanded it. That was the case for the lifeboat with the famous unsinkable Mrs. Brown.
Yes, queen.
She argued with the officer to go back, but he wouldn't listen. And the story of what went on in her boat is kind of hilarious. Like, it could probably get its own show. But like, long story short, Mrs. Brown eventually took charge of the boat and threatened to throw the officer overboard if he didn't shut up. So he hid under a blanket and said mean things about her while he drank whiskey.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Is that real?
Yeah.
No way.
It was like hysterical. I was like, is he a child? Like, what is happening? He's
Hiding
just like,
under a blanket because you're on a freaking little boat in the middle of the ocean.
you're a bitch.
Oh my god,
I hate
so
her.
funny.
Yeah, she like basically took charge of the boat. She had all the women rowing. She was like in charge.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea. I know there was always more story to the Unsinkable Mrs. Molly Brown.
Yeah.
And I thought about doing a episode on her, but I didn't know if it would be enough for an episode. And I love this little tidbit.
Yeah, they kind of go on a little bit in the book about what went on in her boat, and just like apparently the men in her boat were utterly useless. And they were like, we're all gonna die. We don't know where we are.
And
like,
the women are like,
they're
"Buck
like,
up,
yeah,
we
they
gotta
were all
get-"
like, shut up. Like, the
Makes
North Star is
sense.
right over here. Like, I love them.
Wow.
I love that boat. And Molly Brown is amazing. I read a little bit about her because I was like, oh, what? I don't really actually know much about her. And she was like an advocate. She was cool. Unless she's not. I didn't look that deeply into it.
Yeah,
She
this is
seems
like
cool.
a secret thing we don't know.
On the surface, she seems cool. All right. So yeah, I don't go. They spent a lot of time in the book talking about what was happening in all the boats because they all were their own mini soap operas. Like,
I bet. I 100% bet.
just a bunch of rich people for the most part. Like,
Trying to figure out what to do. Everyone's
Yeah.
scared. Yep.
they don't know that someone's coming for them, so they think they have to survive in these lifeboats. So drama.
Wow.
As for the rest of the people, it didn't take long in the water before they succumbed to the cold and they passed away. Soon the night grew very quiet, except for the occasional flares being fired from lifeboats. By 3:35 a.m., the prayers of the passengers were answered. They saw a large steamer ship firing flares coming right for them. It was the Carpathia, who had raced to get there but arrived too late to save most of the passengers. The Carpathia had to carefully navigate around large ice chunks to get to the survivors. They were astonished at the large icebergs in the area, some as tall as 200 feet. The area is now known as Iceberg Alley. So,
Well, what do you know?
yeah. Only 5 miles away from their location was an unbroken sheet of ice extending past the horizon. It's just
Whoa.
frozen wasteland out there, and they're just trucking through as fast
it.
as they can. Like, it just
Whoa.
makes you wonder, and like how reckless they were. It's
Yeah, 'cause
crazy.
I'm sorry, but ice is really freaking strong, and I don't like steel is not.
I mean, not in comparison when you have a 200-foot chunk of ice. Like, ugh. I mean, it makes you think, like, even if they had missed that iceberg, another one probably would have
You're
taken
probably
them down.
right. Yeah, you're probably right.
With how fast they were going, and it was just like a minefield out there. So the Carpathia picked up all the survivors in the boats, and they remarked that like the survivors were dressed in everything from pajamas to evening gowns, so it was kind of like a weird mix. Most of them were silent and in shock. There were some happy reunions, but the majority of the people had lost a loved one and had just lived through the most traumatizing experience ever. Sadly, more survivors would pass away from exposure even after rescue.
Really?
Yeah. They just couldn't like heal from the cold like if they had been in
Yeah.
the water. At around 5:30 that morning, the dang old Californian finally had a wireless operator back on duty and learned what had happened only 10 miles away in the night.
Wow, can you imagine? Ugh.
They would later be the subject of an inquiry that found that they had acted improperly, which led to the death of many people whom they could have rescued.
Yep.
The disaster of the Titanic did end up changing a lot of things for the better. Wireless operators on the ships had to be on duty around the clock. So you have to have someone to fill in for the guy who went to bed.
Yeah.
The insane formula for maritime laws that maritime laws had for the number of lifeboats required changed to something simpler, aka lifeboats for everyone.
I sure hope so.
Makes sense. An international ice patrol was set up to monitor icebergs in North America, which is still used today.
Good.
And although it wasn't a stated rule, it became pretty obvious with the stories and ratio of the dead that there was definitely a class distinction for who was saved.
Yes.
This was also examined critically after the accident. And the numbers don't lie. So only four first-class women died, and 3 were by choice. 15 out of 93 second-class women perished, and 81 out of 179 third-class. That disparity was just as grievous for the children. Almost all first and second class children were saved, but only 23 out of 76 steerage children.
So terrible.
The total amount of people lost to the disaster was anywhere from between 1,490 to 1,635, depending on your source. So only about a third of the passengers on the Titanic survived. And you could probably guess Thomas Andrews didn't make it out, nor did Captain Smith. There was a lot of conflicting stories about Captain Smith's death. Lots of people, quote unquote, saw him. Some think he committed suicide. Other think he went down with the ship, like in the movie. Some claimed they saw him in the water swimming after the sinking. Either way, he perished along with over 1,000 others in one of the deadliest accidents in the history of maritime and the subject of our intense fascination for the last couple of decades. And that's the end.
Wow, Abby. Wow. Brava. Props to you.
I'm so glad I'm done reading.
What a way to do the Titanic again in such an intense way.
Thank you. And also, I felt so bad when I was writing all that. I was like, this is so heavy and sad. And then just had to listen to the music to make myself sadder.
Yeah. You got to torture yourself a little
Just
bit more.
Just a little masochistic. But yeah, I'm glad that we redid that because I actually did learn quite a bit that I didn't realize before. So it's really interesting to research.
Those are great details. You did a good job. I am still fascinated and obsessed.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
R.I.P. R.I.P. Titanic.
R.I.P. Titanic.
We
and
love
all
you.
those people. All right. Well, what do we do?
Let's do City of the Week.
Okay. And that goes to Oxnard, California. I hope I said that right. Oxnard, California. Hey, hey.
Thank you.
What's up? Thank you.
If that's you and you're listening, say hi. We love it. We'd love to hear
How
from
are we
you.
doing? How are you doing?
How's
We wanna
Cali?
know.
Is it warmer? Probably.
Probably.
I actually don't know which part of California Oxnard's in.
Yeah, that's a big state. A little bit.
Anyway, thank you. Love you. What are we watching? What are you listening to? I don't have anything.
Well, what really got us through our time without internet, because you guys didn't experience that. It was just us.
Yeah, we had internet.
So we had to really figure out what to do. And I had to borrow your DVDs, and we caught on to Firefly. Chad's really a big fan. He was like gushing about it. And so we're in the middle of it. We're not going to give it back.
That's fair.
I think we're going to continue watching it because it is good, even though it's so outdated. I see why it's a classic.
I still don't think I've seen that.
Oh, it's
Michael tried to make me watch it and I couldn't get into it.
It's good. I mean, I don't like fully pay attention to it, but I pay attention to it.
Yeah, I know that there's a cult following for it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So it must be good.
I think Chad has a little crush on Nathan Fillion.
I think a lot of men have crushes on Nathan Fillion.
I don't blame them.
He's a cutie.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is about him that men are like drawn to.
Chad said it was his sharp features. Sharp jaw and sharp nose.
It's that jawline.
So that's what we've been watching.
Why do you love Nathan Fillion, Michael?
Yeah, those reasons.
He's visually appealing. Oh, it's funny. Let's see what else. Oh, we were gonna shout out. We forgot last time, but my sister has a coworker named Ashley, and apparently she caught on to our podcast while we were on the break. Mm-hmm. So hey, Ash, hey girl,
hey girl, we see you.
Shout out
Heard
to
about
you.
you.
Yeah. I don't have anything else.
Nope. I think we're kind of just tapped out.
Cool. I have to pee like real bad.
Yeah, that was a good one. Thank you so much, Abby. And that was a good episode.
Good night. Sorry. Fucked up. All right, for my sources, I read the book A Night to Remember by Walter Lord. I looked at Wikipedia, pbs.org, and BuzzFeed.com. Our music is by Broke for Free and Matt Edwards, and we are edited by Michael.
All right. Should I list our social medias?
Please do.
We have a lot of our things at Anxious and Afraid the Pod. So that's our handle for both of our Facebook page and group, along with our Instagram and Gmail.
We have a Twitter at AA the Pod.
You can support us on patreon.com/anxious and afraid.
If you do that, you'll get some pretty nice perks. You get ad-free episodes that are released a whole day early, and you get a free sticker.
You can also support us for free if you can't do any of that by leaving a rate review. You subscribe to the show, tell your friends.
Yeah, we would appreciate all of it too.